All right, let's dive into a question that is just mind-bending. Have you ever wondered about this? If God is supposed to be infinite, invisible, totally outside of space and time, then how in the world could anyone in the ancient world claim to have seen him? It feels like a total contradiction, right? Well, today we're going to investigate that.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by laying out why this question is so tricky. Then we'll look at 3 popular answers and see why they don't quite work. That's going to lead us to a really fascinating fourth option, this idea of a God who hides. And from there, we'll see how the incarnation just changes everything, setting up this incredible cosmic final picture. Okay, first up, the unsolvable question.
So here's the fundamental issue. You read the Old Testament and you get these accounts, like in 1 Kings, where prophets see God on heavenly throne. But how does that even work? How can a being that's infinite, a being that exists everywhere at once, suddenly show up inside our reality, sitting on a physical chair? It just doesn't compute.
And this is where it gets really, really serious. The whole argument, the whole puzzle really, boils down to one fundamental rule that we see again and again in the Bible. If a finite creature, like you or me, were to see the true, raw, unfiltered glory of an infinite God, we just wouldn't survive it. We'd be annihilated.
I mean, this quote from Exodus really drives it home. This isn't just some philosophical brain teaser. The stakes are presented as actual life and death. If God were to fully reveal himself, creation itself would just be gone. So how do you get around that?
All right, section 2. Let's look at some of the ways people have tried to solve this.
So theologians have come up with 3 main theories. Maybe it was both the Father and the Son on the throne. Or maybe it was just the Father. Or maybe it was just a Son. And you know, they all sound plausible on the surface, but as we're about to see, each one has a pretty major fatal flaw.
Section 3, the fatal flaw. Let's put these theories to the test.
So first up, we have the idea that both the Father and the Son were physically there on the throne. The issue here? Well, it seems to fly directly in the face of what the New Testament says.
The Gospel of John is pretty explicit. No one has ever seen God. If people had been seeing the Father on a throne for centuries, well, that statement from John wouldn't make a lick of sense. So, according to this analysis, view 1 is pretty much out.
Okay, fine. So what if it was only the Father on the throne? Well, this one crashes right back into that foundational rule we just talked about.
You see the problem, right? This view doesn't actually solve anything. If seeing the infinite divine essence is lethal, it shouldn't matter which person of the Trinity you're talking about. The outcome would be exactly the same. So this theory still breaks that core rule.
And that brings us to the third and probably most common view, that it was the Son, the second person of the Trinity, who was appearing on the throne before he became human. But this one creates a really fascinating logical puzzle.
Think about it for a second. The New Testament talks all about the Son inheriting a kingdom and being given authority after his death and resurrection. But hold on, if he was already sitting on the throne, ruling the universe, what was there to inherit? Why would he need to give up his rule, become a creature, and then go through all that trouble just to win it back? It just creates this bizarre loop in the whole story of salvation.
So if those first 3 views are kind of shaky, what's left? This brings us to a fourth, much more radical idea. Section 4, the God who hides. This is the proposed solution to the whole paradox.
This view suggests a complete shift in how we think about this. It says, what if God, in his true raw essence, actually stayed hidden? What if those visions of a throne weren't a direct physical appearance of God, but were actually something else entirely?
And the evidence for this is actually pretty strong. I mean, first, just on a logical level, you can't contain an infinite God in a specific location. Second, the Bible itself talks about a God who hides. Third, it solves that whole problem of omnipresence. We can exist within God because we're veiled from his full glory. And this leads to a wild reinterpretation. Maybe those Old Testament visions weren't of God himself, but of an angel, a messenger, a representative acting on his behalf.
So for centuries, according to this view, God remained hidden. But that whole reality was completely shattered by one single, unprecedented event that forever changed the relationship between Creator and creation.
Now this is the absolute heart of the argument. The Son didn't come down from a throne. He entered creation from the outside, becoming one of us. By conquering death and ascending to the throne as a glorified creature, he becomes the ultimate bridge.
For the very first time, finite beings could look upon a fellow creature, Jesus Christ, and in him safely see the image of the invisible God.
And this leads us to our final section, the ultimate picture. This is the cosmic endgame that was made possible by the Incarnation. The source text maps out this incredible timeline based on 1 Corinthians. The Son reigns as this creature king, and he systematically defeats every single enemy. The very last enemy to be destroyed is death itself. And once creation is finally perfected and redeemed, he hands the kingdom back to the Father so that the Father can become, as it says, all in all.
And this verse right here is the key. It shows that the reign of the Son as the creature king is temporary. It has a purpose, and it has a definitive endpoint. That endpoint is the moment the restored creation is presented back to the Father, completing this grand cosmic plan.
And so, we end right back where we started, with a huge mystery. After this entire cosmic drama plays out, after the Son has made the Father known and handed over the kingdom, does that finally mean that we, as finite creatures, will be able to look directly upon the infinite Father? Or does that fundamental barrier between creator and creature always remain? That is the final profound question we're left to think about.